The afternoon sun bathed the tree-lined street of Maple Drive, painting the impeccable facades of the houses golden. A large, noisy moving truck broke the neighborhood's quiet, announcing the arrival of new residents. It was the Washington family, ready to start a new chapter in their lives. David, the father, a successful lawyer in his early 40s, had an easy smile and eyes that conveyed a calm intelligence. His dark skin, gleaming under the sun, contrasted with the impeccable collar of his polo shirt. He was a man of deep integrity, believing in justice above all else, having built his career defending the rights of the underprivileged. Optimistic and resilient, he always sought the positive side of situations, a characteristic that would be tested in the following months. Beside him, Sarah, the mother, a talented and practical architect, the same age as David, radiated serene energy. Her curly hair, pulled back in an elegant bun, framed an expressive and determined face. Sarah was a woman of principles who valued harmony and beauty in all aspects of life, from the design of a building to family dynamics. Her mind was analytical and organized, yet her heart was warm and welcoming, always ready to offer a sympathetic ear or a creative solution to any problem. The children, Michael and Maya, explored the new backyard with the typical curiosity of youth. Michael, 16 years old, was a tall, slender teenager with tanned skin and a modern haircut that highlighted his expressive eyes. He was an introspective and observant young man with a passion for music and technology. A strong sense of justice inherited from his father shaped his character, and he did not tolerate hypocrisy. Sensitive and perceptive, he was capable of grasping nuances that went unnoticed by adults, which, unfortunately, made him an easy target for manipulation. Maya, the youngest, at 12 years old, was a vibrant and lively girl, with long braids and a contagious smile. Her skin was a lighter tone than her brother's, and her large, curious eyes absorbed everything around her. Maya was outgoing and confident, with a fertile imagination and an unconditional love for animals. Pure and innocent, she believed in the inherent goodness of people, though her emotional and somewhat naive nature made her vulnerable to more direct attacks. As they unloaded the first boxes, a figure appeared on the porch of the neighboring house. It was Mrs. Albright, a white woman with impeccably styled gray hair in a bun and a floral dress that made her seem harmless. Her blue eyes, however, were cold and calculating, and a forced smile barely disguised the aversion she felt. Thin and slender, she held an upright posture that denoted a certain rigidity. Mrs. Albright was a hypocrite, hiding behind a facade of kindness and respectability to conceal her ingrained prejudice. Manipulative and controlling, she possessed a sharp mind for orchestrating plans and a frightening ability to distort reality. She approached with a plate of freshly baked cookies, a welcoming gesture that seemed sweet but which for the children already carried a dark omen. "Welcome to Maple Drive," said Mrs. Albright, her voice almost a hiss. "I'm Eleanor Albright, your neighbor. I'm happy to have such a vibrant family in the neighborhood." David and Sarah, accustomed to the cordiality of new neighbors, smiled and thanked her. Michael and Maya, however, felt a shiver. Mrs. Albright's eyes, for a brief moment, had fixed on them with an intensity that went beyond curiosity. It was a look of scrutiny, of judgment, which the children, with their keen sensitivity, immediately picked up on. Michael felt a knot in his stomach, and Maya instinctively shrank slightly behind her mother. Later, as they unpacked their rooms, Michael and Maya tried to warn their parents. "Mom, the neighbor's look." "It was strange," Michael said in a low voice. "It felt like she didn't like us." Maya nodded vigorously. "Yes, she gave me a nasty look as if I had done something wrong." The parents exchanged an amused glance. "Oh, nonsense, children," David said, laughing. "She was just being friendly. It's normal to be a little curious about new neighbors." Sarah added in a reassuring tone, "She even brought cookies. I'm sure she's a lovely person. You're just a little nervous about the move." The parents, in their naivety and optimism, could not imagine the web of lies and torment that the lovely Mrs. Albright was about to weave into their lives. The neighbor's shadow, initially just an omen, began to extend over the Washingtons' new home, threatening the peace and happiness they so longed for. The days that followed the move were marked by a series of strange incidents, which at first seemed small and isolated, but which, over time, formed a disturbing pattern. Mrs. Albright, with her facade of a helpful neighbor, began to weave her web of lies, specifically targeting Michael and Maya. The first attack was directed at Michael. One afternoon, David and Sarah were in the garden planting some flowers when Mrs. Albright approached with a worried expression. "David, Sarah, I need to talk to you about something that has greatly distressed me," she began, in a soft voice full of false compassion. "I saw your son, Michael, smoking in your backyard last night, and it wasn't ordinary cigarette, if you know what I mean. I was shocked, such a young boy." David and Sarah exchanged glances, surprised. Michael was a responsible boy and had never shown interest in drugs. "Are you sure, Eleanor?" Sarah asked, with a hint of disbelief in her voice. "Michael knows we're strict about that." "Absolutely," replied Mrs. Albright, with a dramatic sigh. "I saw it with my own eyes. And that wasn't all. I heard loud music coming from your house last night, and there seemed to be a party. I thought he was alone." The parents confronted Michael, who vehemently denied the accusations. "Dad, Mom, I would never do that. I was in my room studying for my history test. The loud music must have been from the house across the street. They always have parties." Michael felt the injustice burn in his chest. He tried to explain, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. David and Sarah, though reluctant to believe the neighbor, felt uneasy. Mrs. Albright seemed so sincere, so concerned. They lectured Michael, warning him about the consequences of such acts, and the boy felt betrayed by his parents' distrust. It wasn't long before Maya became the next target. Mrs. Albright had a white Persian cat named Snowball, who was the love of her life. One day, Snowball disappeared. Mrs. Albright, in tears, ran to the Washingtons' house. "My Snowball, she's gone! And I saw your daughter, Maya, playing with her in your backyard yesterday. I'm sure she did something to my kitty. She's always been so aggressive with animals." Maya, who loved animals, was horrified by the accusation. "I would never hurt an animal. I was playing with Snowball, and she ran into your backyard, I swear." David and Sarah tried to calm the neighbor, promising to help look for the cat. But Mrs. Albright, with her tearful voice, insisted that Maya was to blame. "She has such a wild look sometimes. I'm sure she hurt her." Snowball was found unharmed hours later, hiding in a bush in Mrs. Albright's backyard. But the incident left Maya shaken, and the parents, again, with a nagging doubt. The neighbor, with her sweet voice and victim-like demeanor, was very convincing. The children tried to explain, but Mrs. Albright had an impressive ability to distort facts, to sow discord with insinuations and half-truths. Mrs. Albright's lies became more frequent and elaborate. She claimed to have seen Michael spray-painting walls, stealing mail, and even breaking into vacant houses in the neighborhood. For Maya, the accusations were even crueler. She had supposedly broken the neighbor's windows, stolen flowers from the garden, and even tried to poison her dog. Every time Mrs. Albright appeared at the door with her forced smile and cold eyes, David and Sarah felt a tightening in their chests. They loved their children, they trusted them, but the volume of the neighbors' complaints was overwhelming. The stories, though often far-fetched, began to erode the parents' trust. Michael and Maya, in turn, felt increasingly isolated and misunderstood. The house, once a refuge, was becoming a battleground, with Mrs. Albright as the invisible yet ever-present enemy. "I don't understand why Mrs. Albright persecutes us so much," Maya confided one night, her eyes welling up. Michael, older and more cynical, replied, "She's strange, Maya. I feel like she doesn't like us. No matter what we do, she'll always make something up." David and Sarah, overhearing their children's conversation, began to question. Mrs. Albright's stories were increasingly inconsistent. Some dates didn't match, some details were contradictory. The neighbor, who presented herself as a fragile and concerned lady, seemed to have exhaustible energy to observe and report every step of the children. Doubt, once a seed, began to germinate, and the tension in the Washingtons' home grew every day. They needed answers. They needed to understand what was happening. The peace of Maple Drive was unraveling, and the Washington family was in the center of a storm orchestrated by a neighbor with a sweet smile and a heart full of poison. The increasing inconsistency in Mrs. Albright's accusations and the visible suffering of their children led David and Sarah to a drastic decision. They needed proof, something concrete that could expose the neighbor, or at least calm their own minds. David, with his legal mind, suggested installing discreet security cameras around the property. Sarah, initially reluctant to invade anyone's privacy, agreed, realizing that her family's peace was at stake. The cameras were installed at strategic points, camouflaged among the foliage and eaves of the house. In the first few days, nothing unusual was recorded. Mrs. Albright continued her daily visits, always with a new complaint or a malicious insinuation about Michael or Maya. The parents, armed with the new tool, began to observe the neighbor with a more critical eye, noticing how her eyes would dart away when questioned about details, or the way she reveled in narrating the children's supposed mischief. Then, one night, the truth began to unfold. It was late, and Michael and Maya were already asleep. David and Sarah were in the living room, reviewing the day's recordings, when an image caught Sarah's attention. Mrs. Albright, dressed in black, with a hood covering part of her face, was sneaking through the Washingtons' backyard. In her hands, she carried a small plastic bag. Sarah's heart pounded. She called David, who approached the screen, his eyes fixed on the image. Mrs. Albright, with furtive movements, knelt near Maya's flower bed, where the girl used to play with her cat, and carefully buried the contents of the bag. Then she stood up, wiped her hands on her clothes, and left as silently as she had arrived. David and Sarah looked at each other, shock and anger etched on their faces. The scene was undeniable, the proof irrefutable. The neighbor, the sweet Mrs. Albright, was planting something in their backyard to incriminate Maya. It clicked. All the lies, all the insinuations, all the baseless accusations, it all made sense now. It wasn't the children's paranoia. It wasn't a series of unfortunate coincidences. It was an orchestrated, cold, and calculating campaign. The next morning, David and Sarah waited for Mrs. Albright to come out to water her flowers. With the recording in hand, David approached her, his face serious. "Eleanor, we need to talk. We have something to show you." Mrs. Albright, with her usual smile, tried to feign innocence. "Oh, David, what a surprise. I hope it's not another complaint about your children. They are so energetic." David ignored the comment and went straight to the point. "We saw you in our backyard last night, Eleanor. The cameras recorded everything." He showed her the tablet with the recording. Mrs. Albright's smile faltered, and her blue eyes, previously cold, now gleamed with a mixture of panic and hatred. Her upright posture stiffened even further, and the mask of kindness fell, revealing the true face of her malice. "What were you planting in Maya's flower bed, Eleanor?" Sarah asked, her voice choked with anger and disappointment. "You were trying to incriminate our daughter, weren't you?" Mrs. Albright, cornered, let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Finally, the truth comes out, doesn't it? I thought you were smarter, but black people, always so naive." Yes, I was planting. I was planting the proof that your daughter is a delinquent, just like your son. You, people of color, don't belong in this neighborhood. This is a neighborhood of good people, of decent families. And black children, they need a lot of punishment so they don't become adult criminals. I was just doing my civic duty, protecting my community from you. Mrs. Albright's words hit David and Sarah like lightning. The racism previously veiled in insinuations and glances was now explicit, cruel, and repugnant. Anger boiled in David, but he controlled himself, remembering his legal training and the need to remain calm. Sarah, in turn, felt a mixture of disgust and sadness. Her children's innocence had been attacked by irrational hatred, and the sweet neighbor was in fact a monster in disguise. "You are mistaken, Eleanor," David said, his voice firm but controlled. "Our children are wonderful children, and you have no right to defame them or attack us with your prejudice. You committed a crime, and you will pay for it." Mrs. Albright laughed again, a shrill, humorless laugh. "Crime? Me? I am a law-abiding citizen. You are the criminals, invading my neighborhood with your darkness. No one will believe you. I am a respectable lady in this community. You are just the new neighbors, the black people. Who do you think the police will believe?" David and Sarah said no more. The conversation was over. The truth was there, naked and raw. Mrs. Albright was not just an intrusive neighbor. She was a racist, a manipulator, a criminal. And David, the lawyer who believed in justice, knew exactly what he had to do. The legal battle was about to begin. And this time, the Washington family was armed with the truth and with the determination to fight for their rights and the dignity of their children.
With the truth unveiled and Mrs. Albright's shocking confession, David wasted no time. The anger he felt was channeled into a determination to seek justice, not only for his family, but for all victims of prejudice. He knew the path would be arduous, but he was prepared for the battle. The first step was to file a detailed police report, attaching the security camera footage as irrefutable proof of the invasion and the attempted incrimination. The police, initially skeptical, had no choice but to open an investigation in the face of the evidence. The case quickly gained notoriety in the neighborhood. Mrs. Albright, once seen as a respectable figure, was now the target of suspicious glances and whispers. Her facade of kindness crumbled, revealing the hypocrisy and hatred she tried to hide. David, with his vast experience in civil law, decided to sue her for defamation, harassment, and trespassing. He knew that victory in this case would be a landmark, a clear warning that racism would not be tolerated, even in its most subtle and insidious forms. The trial was a spectacle. Mrs. Albright, in her arrogance, tried to defend herself, presenting herself as a victim of a conspiracy. She cried, feigned fainting spells, and tried to manipulate the jury with her sweet voice and fragile demeanor. But David was prepared. He presented the recordings which showed the neighbor in the act, invading the backyard and planting the evidence against Maya. Then he called Michael and Maya to testify. The children, once frightened and confused, now spoke with a clarity and conviction that moved everyone. Michael described the false accusations about smoking and parties, and Maya, her voice choked, narrated the trauma of being accused of hurting the neighbor's cat. The most impactful moment of the trial was when David played the recording of the conversation in which Mrs. Albright revealed her racism. Her voice, once so controlled, now sounded full of hatred and contempt. Black children need a lot of punishment so they don't become adult criminals. The phrase echoed in the courtroom, shocking everyone. Mrs. Albright's mask fell completely, revealing the face of prejudice in its purest and most repugnant form. The jury, composed of people from different backgrounds, listened attentively, and the indignation was palpable. Sarah, who accompanied the trial alongside David, felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief at seeing the truth come to light, and sadness at knowing that racial hatred still existed so virulently. She held David's hand, conveying strength and support. Michael and Maya, sitting in the front row, observed the unfolding of the process with a maturity that experience had imposed on them. They were no longer the naive children who had moved to Maple Drive. They had learned a harsh lesson about prejudice, but also about the power of truth and justice. After days of testimonies and arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Hours passed, and the Washington family waited, united, for the verdict. When the jury finally returned, the foreman's voice rang clear and firm. Guilty. Mrs. Albright collapsed in tears, her image as a respectable lady completely destroyed. David and Sarah embraced, emotion overflowing. Michael and Maya, with tear-filled eyes, felt a weight lift from their shoulders. Justice had been served. Mrs. Albright was ordered to pay substantial compensation to the Washington family, and the sentence also included mandatory attendance at diversity and inclusion counseling sessions. Furthermore, the Maple Drive community, once divided by distrust, began to unite around the Washington family, repudiating racism and seeking to build a more welcoming and inclusive environment for everyone. The legal victory was a landmark, not only for the Washington family, but for the community. Mrs. Albright, who tried to destroy Michael and Maya's lives with her lies and hatred, ended up destroying herself. The Washington family, in turn, emerged stronger and more united, with the certainty that truth and justice will always prevail, even in the darkest shadows of prejudice. The house on Maple Drive, once haunted by the neighbor's presence, was now a home of peace and hope, a testament to the resilience and strength of a family that refused to be silenced by hatred.